Well, number 1 is the mouth of the Yellowstone River. Can anybody tell me what number 2 is? Willow? Mouth of the Milk River is exactly right. Leilani, can you tell me what number 3 is? Now listen, 3 and 4 could be a couple things as long as you get them both. What would 3 be in your mind, Leilani? Mouth of the Marias River. That will be number 3, okay. What's number 4 then, Logan? Same thing as the mouth of the Marias, but it had a different name. What's number 4? So Leilani says number 3 is the mouth of the Marias. She could have said something else and said number 4 was the mouth of the Marias, because both arrows point the same place. But what am I looking for now for 4, being she said 3 was the mouth of the Marias? What am I looking for, Logan? Make a decision here. Come on, let's go. We got time. I'm going to try to make a point here if you make a decision.
Yeah, decision. It's a big decision.
So what is it, Logan? Come on, buddy. Decision point. Right? The place where they made the decision to go south. So 3 or 4, I don't care which order you have 3 or 4 in on the test. One can be the mouth of Marias, the other one has to be decision point. And if we got to 5, what's 5? And I even gave you a little hint there. What's 5? The Great Falls of the Missouri. Look at those wonderful falls in that picture. All right, now, this is where we're at. This is where we start the lecture today. Now, believe it or not, because things weren't the same then as they are now, it took the expedition a full month to get around the Great Falls of the Missouri. They didn't go, obviously, up through the water. And I'm going to tell you why it took them a month. It took them a month to go. A month. Now, if you looked at that picture, the first reason it took them so long is that the Great Falls were 5 waterfall cascades, all uphill, as they had not yet reached the water would be going the other way, Continental Divide. So as they approach this thing, they're looking at 5 cascades of waterfalls, which is a long distance. Anybody ever been to Great Falls? Okay, I'm a Montana guy, so I've been there lots of times. It's quite a sight. Quite a sight. Seems like every year somebody drowns in the Great Falls of Missouri because they don't pay attention to what they're supposed to be doing. That's 5 cascading falls. It's quite steep. So that's the first reason why it took them a month to get around them, is because they were 5 cascades high, all uphill. Okay, all uphill. Now, what do they got with them? Canoes, supplies, equipment, all that stuff we talked about. And from where they started, 17 miles is what they had to walk to get around. 17 miles. And what are they carrying? Their canoes, all their equipment, their supplies, themselves, etc. So it was not an easy haul. So the second reason why it took them a month is they were forced to haul canoes, supplies, and equipment around the 17-mile route. 17 miles to get around the falls, from the front to the back. The third reason why it would take them a month is because the terrain was very rough. Very, very rough terrain at that time in history. Very, very rough terrain. You know, and the fourth reason I can relate to, but not even close to them. You know, I went up to West Tensleep Lake and camped. Anybody camped up there? West Tensleep Lake up in the mountains? How many have ever camped up there?
I camped up.
God, we went up there and we got our trailer set up, and I couldn't believe it. I never spent 1 second outside the trailer. Why? Oh, the mosquitoes were horrid. And I'm complaining. Nothing comparable to what they had in those days. And no mosquito spray, right? Maybe if you stunk bad enough, the mosquitoes would stay away from you, probably would attract. But the fourth reason it took so long for them to get around the expedition is they were always fighting not only mosquitoes, but gnats. And where are they especially thick? That's why they're thick at West Tensleep Lake, because you're around water, But when you have 5 cascading falls of the Great Falls of the Missouri, that's all it was at that point in history, was a reproductive place for mosquitoes and gnats. They were horrid, bothersome beyond recognition. So the mosquitoes and gnats were very thick during the entire expedition, but they were horrible around the Great Falls of the Missouri. What else did they have to keep an eye out for as they walked those 17 miles? Grizzly bears, who were not friendly, to say the least. And had they seen a lot of man? No, and so it looked like a pretty nice little meal for them. So they were continually fighting off grizzly bears. So those are the reasons why it took them so long to get there. There were 5 cascading waterfalls, all uphill. The men were forced to haul canoes, supplies, and equipment around the 17-mile route. The journey around the falls consisted of very, very tough terrain. Mosquitoes and gnats were very thick during the entire expedition, but were especially bad around the falls. And the area was also swarming with grizzly bears, who continually approached whenever the expedition camped. Always were a threat. Well, as they get around the Great Falls of the Missouri, they want to try to find the Shoshone Indians, which they have heard are peaceful Indians in that area. So their goal, once they get around the Great Falls of the Missouri, are to try to locate the Shoshone Indians. They're supposedly a peaceful tribe. And what's upcoming? What type of, is this terrain going to get better after the Great Falls or worse? Worse, because now they're getting into what? Rocky Mountains. So what are they going to need to make that journey to the Pacific?
A guy.
What? Horses. So they're hoping to run into these Shoshone Indians so they can trade or pay for some horses that they're going to need to climb the tough terrain that was upcoming. Okay, do you think they're going to pack these canoes over these Rocky Mountains? No, they're not. They want horses now. And so the goal is to try to locate the Shoshone Indians so they could get some much needed horses to climb the tough terrain. They couldn't find the Shoshone Indians, so Lewis and Clark again split up to try to locate these Shoshone Indians so they could get some horses. Clark stayed with the expedition and continued upriver looking for the Shoshone, planning on meeting Lewis once the natives were located. And what Lewis did is he took a scouting party to specifically try to locate the tribe. So what Clark did is he just continued up the Missouri, now hoping to run into them on the way. Whereas Lewis took a specific number of men with him and branched away from the river in search of the Shoshone Indians. And the hope was one of them would find them and they would meet back on the Missouri. Does that make sense? Clark stays with the expedition, hoping to run into them as they continue up the Missouri. Lewis takes a scouting party and branches off and tries to find him that way. Well, finally, on August 17th of 1805, and you will need your map for this as well, Lewis and his men make contact with the Shoshone Indians. Finally, on August 17, 1805, Lewis and his men make contact with the Shoshone Indians. Where do they find them? At the 3 forks of the Missouri River, which is number 6 on your map. So finally, on August 17th of 1805, Lewis and his scouting party locate the Shoshone Indians, and they find them at the 3 forks of the Missouri River, which is your number 6 on your map. Now this is kind of an interesting river because it's where the Missouri River splits into 3 other separate rivers. Thus the name 3 Forks of the Missouri. Right now there's a town there. You know what the name of the town is in Montana? 3 Forks, Montana. What's kind of cool about it is there are 3 rivers that run into the Missouri at the 3 Forks of the Missouri. And they are the Jefferson River, which is number 9 on your map, the Jefferson River. Who'd they name that after? Lewis and Clark named it after President Thomas Jefferson. Very good. So number 9 is the Jefferson River. Number 8 is the Madison River, named after Secretary of State James Madison. So number 8 is the Madison River, named for Secretary of State James Madison. Which leaves us number 7, which was called the Gallatin River, named after Secretary of the Treasury Albert Gallatin. So, Lewis meets the Shoshone Indians at the Three Forks of the Missouri River. That's where 3 rivers run into the Missouri River. Number 9 is the Jefferson River, named for President Thomas Jefferson. Number 8 is the Madison River, named for Secretary of State James Madison. And number 7 on your map is the Gallatin River, named after Secretary of the Treasury Albert Gallatin.
So,
There's
was Missouri-
Gallatin Mountains too, isn't there?
Yeah.
I think there is.
This is what
Was the Missouri always called that? Or did they come up with that?
the Missouri was pretty much named by the time they had gotten there, because people had traveled that day. Okay? Now, it's kind of interesting off the subject, but when I take kids to Washington, D.C., we always go to the White House. And right next to the White House is the Department of the Treasury. Right next to it. And there's a great big statue in front of the Department of the Treasury. It's a statue of Albert Gallatin, okay, with the Gallatin River. Now, off the beat a little bit, Jefferson River is not a bad fishery. Madison River in Montana used to be a great fishery, but now it's a floatery. And so what everybody does is float the river as recreationally. So that's kind of ruined the fishing. The good fishing in Montana near the Bozeman area is the Gallatin. Although nowadays, if you go at the wrong time, you're casting in between boats, you know, tour boats or, you know, rafts that are floating the river back and forth. But I've got a couple of really good spots on the Gallatin River. If you ever get to Bozeman, let me know, and if you're a fisherman, I'll tell you where they're at. But anyway, the Three Forks of the Missouri is where Lewis and his men contacted the Shoshone Indians. Now, when the expedition got to the Three Forks of the Missouri, Sacagawea began to recognize the countryside. It was like coming back like I'd been here before. Gee whiz, she didn't recognize anything up to this point, but when she got to the Three Forks of the Missouri, she started to recognize the country. She had actually been in the area before when she was taken prisoner by another Indian tribe. So she's going to be a lot more, have the ability maybe to do more guiding than interpreting, because now she realizes, hey, I've been here before. When I was captured as a young girl by a rival Indian tribe, this was the area in which I was captured or taken to. So she starts to recognize things. Now, if you're the expedition, you want horses, it's pretty important that you communicate with the Shoshone Indians, right? Otherwise, they don't know what you're talking about. So who do they meet with? The Shoshone chief. Okay, and his name is Komeowi. Doesn't look like that. It's on your ID sheet. You're going to have it out to get it on there. Komeowi was the Shoshone chief. It isn't spelled anywhere close to the way it sounds. But the Shoshone chief was Komeowi. And as soon as the expedition met with that Shoshone chief, Komeowi, Sacagawea looked at him and he looked at her, and you wouldn't believe what happened. They were brother and sister. Brother and sister. Unbeknownst to them at the time. So the Shoshone chief, Komeowi, and Sacagawea looked at each other, recognized each other, and figured out they were brother and sister. Is that good or bad for the core discovery?
Good.
It's not good, it's great. because all of a sudden they have no worries. Does that assure that the Corps of Discovery is going to receive those fresh horses they so desperately needed? Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay? Well, the Corps of Discovery ends up spending 2 weeks with the Shoshone Indians. 2 weeks. They get a well-deserved rest before they're going to depart for their final part of the journey to the Pacific. So the Corps of Discovery is going to spend 2 weeks with the Shoshone Indians. They're going to get a well-deserved rest before they depart on the final part of their journey to the Pacific. Now, other than getting horses, what else did the Shoshone Indians supply them with? Nope. What? Nope. This is going to be the toughest part of the trip because they're going where? Over the mountains. So what do they provide them with? Nope. Information on how exactly to get through the Rocky Mountains. Because you're just going to start anywhere and start climbing. You're going to look for some sort of a trail or a pass, are you not? Well, what happened is during their 2-week stay, the Shoshone Indians directed the expedition on the route through the mountains that would take them to that Columbia River, which will be flowing the other way and take them straight to the Pacific. So they direct them to go to an area known as the Lolo Trail, which is number 10 on your map. Now known today as a highway as the Lolo Pass. And it's a pass through the Rocky Mountains from Montana into Idaho. At the time, it was just nothing more than a very primitive trail. So the successful meeting with the Shoshone was crucial as the tribe received, the expedition received their horses they need, and the tribe directs the expedition on the route through the mountains that will take them to the Columbia River. These steep and rugged mountains would be the Bitterroot Mountains, and the expedition would trail a tortuous trail known as the Lolo Trail, now known as the Lolo Pass. Okay, and that's number 10 on your map. So, they leave the Shoshone Indians, and this is an important date, on September 13th, 1805, they reach the start of the Lolo Trail. Now they have to get over it to get to the Columbia River. September 13th, 1805, the expedition has left the Shoshone Indians and they arrive at the base of the Lolo Trail on September 13th, 1805. So on September 13th of 1805, the Corps of Discovery arrives at the base or the start of the Lolo Trail. And it's number 10 on your map. Well, there you go. How about that? Yeah. Now, this trail is going to be 140 miles long and will take them into present-day Idaho, and it's going to be the most difficult of the entire expedition. It'll be the most difficult travel of the entire expedition. I'm going to give you 4 reasons why. What's that? 140 miles. Usually I'll repeat it several times. So, the 140-mile trail into present-day Idaho will be the most difficult hardship on the expedition for 4 reasons. And I'll give you those 4 reasons in a minute. So, the 140-mile trail, from the start of the Lolo Trail until they get over the mountains into present-day Idaho, is going to be the most difficult hardship on the expedition. I'm going to give you 4 reasons why. Number 1, if you think the trail was tough getting over the Great Falls of the Missouri, this trail was way worse. The terrain was very steep and very, very rocky. Incredibly steep and rocky. So there's the first reason why this is going to be the biggest hardship on the expedition thus far, is the Lolo Trail was incredibly steep and rocky and very primitive. Now if you go on a trail, 4-wheeler trail, heck, if the trees fall down, I understand all the bunch of trees fell down up towards freeze-out. And so what's the Forest Service been doing? Clearing them out.
Yeah.
They got them cleared, by the way, because I'm supposed to go there
They
Saturday.
cleared out up to freeze-out point, but they're still all laying down.
They're still laying down past that?
Yeah.
Dang, my wife's not going to want to hear that.
Well, no,
We got-
they got the trail open.
Oh, okay, but so they cleared the trail to Paint Rock?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome, because I bought a new razor. My wife wants to go that way.
Yeah, we moved down to the basement like 3 weeks ago.
Oh, awesome, that's good info. She'll be happy. But anyway, this trail isn't like these four-wheeler trails. This was barely visible and incredibly steep and rocky. The second reason why it was such a difficult hardship for the Corps of Discovery is that the ground, what time of the year is it? September. Ground is covered with snow and ice. So as they're traveling over the Lolo Trail, they're traveling over steep terrain that's covered with snow and ice. The third reason why it was such a hardship is just what Brady was talking about. The pass was broken by fallen timber, very over thick pine and fir trees. The Forest Service wasn't in there, William, to clear out the Lolo Trail in 1805. Yeah, the pass was broken by fallen timber. In other words, timber was all over the pass. In the way, they had to climb over fallen timber. The overgrown pine and fir trees made it very, very thick, so they were always dodging trees along the trail. It was not a clear trail. It was just a barely visible walking trail that was covered with snow and ice, very rough terrain. The fir trees and the pine trees are overgrown. Many have fallen in the way. It was very, very difficult to get over. And what would you need to have on that 140-mile trip to make yourself healthy enough to get over it? Water was not a problem because we had ice and snow, but what was a problem? Food. There was very little game. How many deer and elk do you see in very, very, very rough terrains? They don't like it any more than you do, right? So you don't see, there was very little game to shoot on the trail. So it was going to get a little western over that 140 miles. So the 140-mile trail would be the most difficult hardship for four reasons. One, the terrain over the pass was very steep and rocky. Number two, the ground was covered with snow and ice. Number three, the pass was broken by fallen timber.